zoysia grass, centipede, or St. Augustine if you're further south and east. Our common sense strategy for those grasses here in the fall is basically leave them alone. Continue mowing them, but by all means, don't keep applying fertilizer to promote a lot of growth. We just want these things to enter dormancy. The most important thing we can have people do on warm season grasses now that we're into mid-September is to start raising their cutting heights to allow them to improve their winter hardiness. So this is an image, it's an oldie but goodie from close to 15 years ago of a master gardener volunteer back in the day from the Williamsburg area that was one of the first people to install Xeon zoysia grass. And this is zoysia grass as it is preparing to enter winter dormancy. Now, the only thing that hasn't happened here that I'd say, could he done something a little different would be to go ahead and raise that cutting height. But it was such a piece of carpet that I just couldn't convince him to raise that height because the density, and he said, you just like to walk through this stuff. But you see what's going on there. It's starting to turn brown. All the lawns in the background, those are tall fescue. They're looking their best at this time of year. So this is what's going to happen. This should naturally occur. It's going to happen and stay in place for approximately 5 months. So we just want to leave it alone, let it enter its dormancy phase, and then come out next spring as healthy as it can possibly be. So that's warm season. We're not going to say a lot about warm season unless you have specific questions later on. So where we're going to focus is all of our cool season grasses. These are things like tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, fine leaf fescues, maybe perennial ryegrass. And fall is the season in which we should do the majority of our management in cool season lawn grasses. So that would be things such as establishment and or renovation, fertilization. We should be adjusting now our cultural management programming. And we're going to touch on things such as mowing and even aeration. And then at this time of year, there are going to be a few things that we need to consider in regards to pest management. Do you or don't you? And I specifically want to focus on weed control because a lot of people are familiar with how we use pre-emerges for crabgrass and spring weeds, but maybe not so much the potential for using certain chemistries for the fall. So we're going to cover those types of issues. But again, take home message, the title, fall into your lawn. If you're a cool season turfgrass person, the most important season of the year is now upon us. Now, as Master Gardener volunteers, I know that you all have had it ingrained over and over, but you'll always hear it in a goat leaf presentation. There's no season to say you must do soil testing. Any season is appropriate to do a soil testing. So I'm telling you, there's never a wrong time to soil test. And this is something that you all do a great job letting the public know because most people don't even realize there is such a thing. But fall is a logical time to do this since there's so much growth potential for cool season grasses. And even if you're growing warm season grasses, I had someone call me the other day to say, oh, I've got a St. Augustine lawn here in the Norfolk area. Is it okay to soil test now? And I was like, absolutely. And they were pretty sure they're going to need lime. And I said, what a great time to apply, because if you need a lot of lime, you can apply a lot of lime through the dormancy period and have your soil ready to go next spring when those grasses wake up. So soil testing will always be in vogue regardless of the time of year. We tell everyone that you need to do this maybe only every 3rd to 4th year. And if you follow the recommendations from the soil test report, again, it shouldn't be another 3 or 4 years until you need to do that again. Now let's see if I can offend some blondes here. Okay, I always try to have some type of a slide to tell you about. It's tough to grow grass in Virginia because we are a transition zone state. So there's nothing as easy as this corn maze when it comes to picking out, well, what is the best grass? And my answer is always, for most things in the science of turf grass management, it depends. Because if you tell me your location, you tell me your soils, you tell me your use characteristics, if you tell me something specific about what your expectations are in terms of how that lawn looks, my recommendation to you is probably going to vary on every single one of those accounts. But this is the season to make the changes, the improvements, or even the establishment of these cool season grasses, because shorter days, cooling nights, still warm temperatures, we basically have the next 6 to 8 weeks of growth potential that gives us a huge jump start on next spring. And unfortunately, the biggest mismanagement strategy, and it's done over and over and over every year, is you all live this. You go to the big box stores now, you're going to see Halloween, but it's already moving over into Christmas. There's very little about lawn fertilization now. People don't realize that. But boy, in the spring, everyone is promoting fertilizer. You need to put this program out, et cetera, et cetera. That's absolutely not the best time. It's okay to do a little bit. Fall is our preferred period and when we should be out making these differences. So what are your possibilities? The largest acreage cool season turf grass that we grow and we recommend in Virginia are tall fescue blends. A blend is 2 or more of the same species. So you take 2 or more cultivars, AKA varieties of tall fescues. And for the world of managed turf, we have now for about 25 years, we've had what are called turf type tall fescues. These are grasses that were specifically bred not for biomass, not for yield like you get for grazing and foraging and haying like we use in animal production. But these are grasses that were selected for having finer leaf texture, darker green color, higher density. Again, characteristics that are desirable for a lawn, but definitely not necessarily desirable for a pasture or a grazing or a haying situation. Another option, which has become extremely popular due to the kind of in the field research that was done 20 some odd years ago by many of our sod producers throughout the mid-Atlantic. And those are combinations of what we call mixtures, which is when we put together different species, in this case, tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass. That is also a very good choice. Typically what happens is that the seed is pre-mixed for you. It's usually about 90% tall fescue by weight and 10% Kentucky bluegrass. And what that results in due to the seed size is roughly a 50-50 on the basis of seed count between fescue and bluegrass. And what happens is that the superior performing species in a certain spot will tend to dominate. But we get better color in the spring from the quicker green up of the tall fescue. And then the Kentucky bluegrass says, if you get any damage, I've got the potential to creep because I possess rhizomes. So that's been a kind of a boon to the seed industry, to our sod industry in particular. The combinations, they work quite well now because the breeders have got grasses that look so similar in their leaf texture that it makes it acceptable. And again, 30, 35 years ago, when my career was starting, this was an absolute no-no because they didn't look anything at all alike. But now these grasses as species look so much alike that we basically can mix them. And most people don't even know there are 2 different grasses in the lawn. So that is just overall best adapted, what serves most people's needs in cool season, either fescue blends or fescue bluegrass mixtures. Now, if you want to go for the cover of Southern Living magazine, you want yard of the month, you are a lawn nut and you just are really committed to the maintenance, but I want the beauty that comes with it. Mostly sun, high inputs, Kentucky bluegrass blends. Bluegrass gives us one of the prettiest lawn grasses that basically we grow on the planet. The color is phenomenal, dark green. The texture is very fine bladed. Again, the creeping potential means that if it is damaged, it does recuperate. But these are grasses which when somebody tells me I don't mind, I'm like, be careful. Because if you really want a great looking lawn, then you have to provide pretty serious inputs. And these grasses require more fertility since they produce a lot of rhizome growth potential by those below ground stems. They're slowly but surely going to produce thatch. And every 3 to 4 years, they probably are going to need to be vertical mowed to remove that thatch. Another possible combination is Kentucky bluegrass with perennial ryegrass. The two grasses look almost identical. The reason people do that is because the perennial ryegrass germinates so quickly. It'll be up within 4 to 7 days. Those of you that are Hokie football fans, if you've been watching the field here in the first couple of games, you're going to see its mowing patterns continue to look better and better as the season progresses. And the reason for that is that that field is slowly but surely having perennial ryegrass seed introduced to the Bermuda grass base. And the ryegrass has so much wax on its leaves. That's where you get all these great striping patterns that you see in these athletic fields and golf courses, is due to the reflection of the light. So that's a solid mixture, but it also has high inputs. And then if you've got a desire for low input, and in particular a shaded lawn, FF there stands for fine leaf fescues. Those are grasses that can withstand situations where maybe you only get 3 to 4 hours of light per day. It's a good solid choice, with the limitations being fine fescue has very poor traffic tolerance, and it also is not tolerant of poorly drained soils. But if those aren't issues for you, don't have a lot of traffic, have pretty good drainage, you want something that is a nice, thick, dense turf with minimal inputs, then fine fescue is an outstanding choice. Moderate shade, in my mind, that's something in the range of 4 to 6 hours of light per day, and the other usually 6-7 hours of daylight's probably in the shade. Turf type tall fescues will probably work, but you might have to do a little what I call sweetening the pot every fall with a little bit more reseeding. So those are kind of my thoughts on the best cool season turf grasses. And again, remember what I said, it depends on situation, use, location, soil, etc., in terms of what would be best for you. Now, haven't seen it yet online, but it's in VCE Pub's hands. It won't have changed a lot, but I'm using a picture from last year's 2022-23 Virginia turfgrass variety recommendation list. The 23-24 is submitted, and I didn't check this morning, maybe it's there, but it will not have changed tremendously because these things only slowly but surely pop on or pop off. But if you weren't aware of this, as someone that you all go out and talk to people and give them advice on where they can get science-based information, be aware that this annual pub is something that's produced by Virginia Cooperative Extension, and these are the recommended and promising varieties that have performed in the field. And these trials go on 5 to 6 years. We actually love to have extreme weather events, extreme pest pressure, whatever we can get to happen in our locations where we do these trials. And for us, we do trials in Blacksburg, the Hampton Roads, AREC in Virginia Beach, and we also partner with the University of Maryland to kind of give us a big geographical triangle, because all three of these locales in terms of climate are quite different. Recommended varieties are what we call kind of the best of. They have the most proven field performance data, but most promising cultivars will end up being promoted to recommended as long as our Crop Improvement Association lab sees their seed. And so our process is we do the evaluations in the field. They've got to perform in the field. And also our Crop Improvement Association for either Maryland or Virginia must see the seed and must test the seed to confirm that, yep, it's good seed, it's quality material, doesn't contain a lot of noxious weeds or other contaminants in it. That's kind of our two-step process to developing the varieties that make this list. And slowly but surely, things that are no longer in production, you can't find them, they'll go off the list, and there's always something new in preparation to come onto the list. So just be aware that this is available. Here's the frustration. You get people call, I'll take any 2 or 3 of these things. Big box retailers aren't buying their seed on the basis of what Virginia Tech and University of Maryland are telling people. We're doing research, but that doesn't mean that's what they purchase. So tell them to try to find things that have at least 1, if not 2 of these varieties. And many of our best seed companies will have at least 2 of these different varieties in their seed sales materials. So just tell them to get this material out, take a look at it, see if you can find some of these main varieties on their purchase. Now, I want to talk a little bit about establishment, because fall is ideal to either renovate or establish cool season turf grass. And this was a lawn that I worked with several years ago with one of our new department heads that came to campus from Texas, only knew warm season grasses. And I told him, what do you think about a cool season lawn? And he'd never done it. But I said, okay, you got a small lawn. This isn't going to take us a heck of a lot of time to do. We ran our soil test. We treated this lawn with glyphosate to remove all the existing, it was mostly weedy vegetation. And in mid-September, we made our move towards establishing the new lawn, because this is the time for renovation or establishment. The first step in doing this was the soil test. And this particular lawn needed quite a bit of lime. And this is just another shot in which we've had materials applied, and now we're running a machine that was rented, which is just a real trick to run across the lawn. You see what type of seed bed is being generated here by this machine. We want to incorporate the lime or the starter fertilizer to about a 4 to 6 inch depth, in which we are doing that with the idea of basically supporting the roots as they'll penetrate to that depth. Other people ask about, well, should I incorporate organic matter? And that's one of those, it's a great thing to do if you can afford to do it. Typically, 1/2 inch, maybe 1 inch of incorporated organic matter into a soil that's pretty much void of organic matter can really pay rewards. This past season, someone sent me some pictures where they've incorporated 4 inches into the top 4 to 6 inches. And guess what? That did not work. Too much of a good thing. They basically made themselves a peat bog. So again, a little bit goes a long ways, but any opportunity you have to incorporate these materials and distribute them completely throughout that 4 to 6 inch depth, wow, it really does pay dividends. This particular lawn also had a need for phosphorus. And phosphorus, which is the middle number here in this analysis, you see 18, 24, 12. So this material is about 24% phosphate by weight. The soil test said it needed 1 pound of phosphate per 1,000 square feet. Roughly, that means 4 pounds of this product per 1,000 square feet were applied in order to deliver the phosphorus that was needed. Of course, little nitrogen, little potash came along for the ride. Those are also beneficial nutrients, but in particular for seeding, we want to be sure that that soil test is indicating that our phosphorus levels are suitable for the establishment of this new root system and all the benefits inside the plant, which phosphorus provides for us. A big one being it basically is the energy producing compound, or the composition of the energy producing compounds that we have inside our plant systems. So that was incorporated into the site. Did a little raking off to get rid of any large chunks of old debris, stones, any pieces of tree bark, etc., that are in place in this lawn, and to smooth it out, because this is going to be what's essentially our final grade. And also at this point in time, it's very important to remember that you want to control where the water will eventually be going from this lawn. And you don't want to leave, some valleys out there where water is going to accumulate. You need to be respectful of your neighbors and make sure you're not channeling all the water over there. Unless you have a situation like we had here at Tech's football game this past weekend. And again, if you're a Hokie fan, you're probably aware that for a noon game, they had to basically play all day to try to get it completed, because the thunderstorms just started lining up one after the other. But that sand-based field, there are a lot of great pictures on Twitter. Even it couldn't withstand the volume of water that was coming down in just incredible amounts in very short periods of time. But you could see the center of the field, where it is slightly crowned at about a 0.5% slope, the water was visibly draining. And by the middle of the afternoon, the field had drained. They brought in the vacuum system, and the field was in great shape to play later on that day. So think about, where is the water going in your lawn, because this is that one opportunity to do it the right way. We chose turf type tall fescue for the lawn. This is what the fescue looks like. We put it out in this particular case about 6 pounds of pure live seed per 1,000 square feet. I'll show you a table on that in just a second. Here's Dr. Thompson making that application. And again, his fertilizer went out with this spreader. His seed went out with this spreader. After he put the seed out, the next thing he did was he took that rake out one more time and he lightly raked across the lawn, in which to ensure that he had soil to seed contact. We took a broom, we pushed the seed off of his sidewalk and his driveway, again, back into the lawn. And then the other thing that we tell people, don't forget this, because when it comes to conserving moisture, a great and very simple strategy is to get some small grain straw. Okay, now straw, not hay, but basically about a bale per 1,000 square feet. And just walk the lawn, shaking this material on there. This is going to conserve moisture, give those seed the best opportunity to send their root down into that soil and have enough moisture in which to establish. And the other key is, if you aren't going to irrigate, then simply keep the water off and let Mother Nature run the show. But once you start irrigating and initiate the germination process, the worst thing that you could do would be to then refrain from irrigating. So either make a commitment to applying water or letting Mother Nature run the show, and keep your fingers crossed that you get enough moisture. And typically we will get enough moisture. But again, worst case scenarios, extreme drought or flash floods like we had in Blacksburg this past weekend. And here's what it looked like 2 weeks. The commitment by Dr. Thompson was he had just a little standing sprinkler that he went out and irrigated it 2 or 3 times a day, just lightly keeping the soil moist. And 2 weeks, he is on his way towards, here comes the new tall fescue. This was the first time which I told him, all right, seeing this, I'm satisfied with your establishment. It's only going to get better from here. Now we need to start backing off on the irrigation and let this soil dry out a little bit. And I was like, Dr. Thompson, it's pretty much time to make that first mowing event once this soil is dry enough for you to get the mower out onto that soil. And I said, the other thing is, don't do anything about that straw. Simply chop it up, return it to the soil as an organic matter amendment. It's not going to hurt anything. You're probably going to get some wheat seed that are going to germinate, but don't worry about that. Again, just mow it off. It's an annual, it's going to die. So there's the basic steps that are involved in establishment. It's not rocket science, but again, some things that need to be done: soil testing, soil tillage, incorporation, proper amount of seed, mulch for moisture conservation, and then being prepared to mow it. A few other thoughts. I noticed right there and towards the bottom here, there is a weed. Okay, and I'm like, you only got one weed, pluck that out by hand. But something that typically comes along for the ride with soil tillage is we're bringing weed seed up to the surface. And of course, weed seed like moisture and sunlight, etc. What you got to remember is, in a new establishment, you can't use pre-emergent herbicides. I'm going to come back to talk about that a little bit more towards the end. And when you apply herbicides to control broadleaf weeds, like this one, escape down here that just popped up in the lawn, that would need to be mowed. That turf would need to be mowed at least 3 to 4 times for meeting most label recommendations about putting a broadleaf herbicide for weed control. So my usual recommendation is just be patient. Don't lose your mind over some of the weeds that come in, because that's just par for the course in these new establishments. Now, what were the rates? These are highlighted in kind of this yellow gold color here of our cool season grasses in pounds of pure living seed per 1,000 square feet. And what pure live seed means is that you want to look at the label of the seed tag, and you want to look at its percent germination and its percent purity. And the higher those percentages are, then the more pure living seed are in the bag. And a lot of people think, well, isn't the whole bag living seed? And it's like, of course not. Some of that seed is not alive to begin with. Some of it is got other inert material. Some seed these days contains some type of a coating, and that coating adds to weight. But again, it's not contributing to either living or germination in terms of seed testing. So, for instance, if I look at a product, and these are just numbers I'm going to throw out there that says, well, it's 80% purity and 80% germination, 0.8 times 0.8 is 64%. And that means if I gave you 10 pounds of that seed product, that it only contains 6.4 pounds of pure living seed. 3.6 pounds of that material is inert, possibly weed seed, who knows what. But again, what you want to be applying is the basis of pure living seed. So these values are all presented in pounds of pure live seed per 1,000 square feet. And if you plant mixtures, this one down here, typically that 90-10 mix of tall fescue Kentucky bluegrass, that one is seeded somewhere around 3 to 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Most of the seed sources that you buy from commercial seed products, they'll probably give you recommendations specific to these types of pure living seed, kind of textbook recommendations that we talk about. Again, these are ranges. Some of the earliest turfgrass science was done in figuring out what were legitimate levels of seed. If you put out more, it'll look great immediately, but long term, the lawn will probably fail because too much competition. So keep these types of ranges in mind, because this is what the science has known now for probably close to 100 years about what are legitimate pure living seed rates of application. And what if it's a situation like this, where there's been some damage and the majority of this lawn had traditionally, it looked pretty darn good. And then there was something that came along for the ride in the mulch that was installed, you see in this left bed, and it leached out of that mulch and moved into the lawn. And it definitely was either seriously damaging or in many cases killing that turf. So there'd be no reason to go out there and completely spray this lawn as long as the customer is satisfied with how it had been performing. But in this situation, you do want to do some type of soil preparation to achieve the soil to seed contact in these areas. So we tell people is use a power rake, which you can rent, a vertical mower / dethatcher you can rent, or you can take a garden rake if you've got the patience and the muscle to go out and prep the seed bed there. Everything else we talked about in terms of, I think the only other thing I could think to maybe tell someone to do, and this would be a case of where I would probably take my rotary mower and I probably try to scout this particular dead material, at least cut it down to, again, remove as much of this dead vegetation to ensure that my seed can get through this material and get to where the roots will then penetrate the soil as this seed germinates. But here's what a vertical mower looks like. This is a dethatcher is another common name, and this is a great seed bed prep tool. Many of these types of products are actually basically rented out with a seed box on the back of it that has different settings for applying certain amounts of seed, that you just walk this along and drop the seed in right behind the slits in the soil that it creates. And another tool on a smaller scale that works quite well, again, with a little bit of that elbow grease power, is this device, a garden weasel, which is a great tool to go out, run over top of a damaged area. Again, the whole intent here is to establish soil to seed contact so those new roots will quickly penetrate into the soil. Excuse me. Other things that will take place or should take place in the fall, and this is one of those, well, do you need to? So I'm going to go forward a slide to tell you, first of all, do you need to? Here's the need to assessment tool. I'm dramatic here. I'm pressing it in with my thumb. This is an old Goatley picture. I no longer have enough strength in my thumbs that I could do this. I have to push it in with my hand. But the concept is, if I can take a screwdriver into a moist soil of a lawn, and I can penetrate that screwdriver 3 to 4 inches without having to stab it, to really jump up and down and press it in, then realistically, my need for running this machine over the surface, which this is a core cultivator. This is one of the tools that actually pulls the plugs, and you hear people talk about a plugger or plugging their lawn. This is officially termed hollow tine coring. It's the superior soil compaction tool, but it also causes quite a bit of disruption to your lawn surface. This particular shot is coming off one of the edges of our football practice area, in which it gets a lot of the traffic. And so throughout the growing season, we're constantly in there pulling cores and probably dropping, in this case, a little cool season seed, always trying to keep something in place. If it's needed, do your test. And people say, well, what if it's not needed and I want to do it? I'm like, that's fine. I just tell people there's really not a lot of additional benefit. The key is if it's needed, then there's tremendous benefit to open up the soil and to get oxygen levels back in the soil where they need to be to support not only healthy plant root development, but to also support all the microbes, the bacteria, actinomycetes, all the good fungi that live in the soil that are doing things for us. They require oxygen as well. But keep this in mind about giving recommendations about, do you need to aerate your lawn? This is as complicated as it gets in terms of making that decision, is simply to use a screwdriver and determine, can I penetrate 3 to 4 inches? Now, tying this together with the potential for doing some seeding, maybe you'd like to introduce some new genetics of the latest, greatest cultivars that have come on the market. Could you link the two together? The answer is you certainly can. What you would typically do in most cases is you would come through now and apply the seed after coring. The way I tell people, if I had to give a recommendation about the way I think it probably would work the best, would be plug the lawn, do the coring event, allow the cores to air dry to the point where you could pick it up and then easily crumble it, and then take something like a piece of chain link fence or an old piece of carpet, and if you got a riding lawnmower, it won't be quite as conspicuous as you out there dragging it, but again, tell the neighbors what you're doing. They think you lost your mind out there dragging a piece of carpet over your lawn. You're breaking up these cores in which to create soil to seed contact. Is essentially what we call top dressing. And what we'd like to see you do is kind of break the cores up, go out and apply the seed kind of, in general across the lawn, have that seed land on top of that soil material that's now been used to backfill the holes and to cover the surface of the soil. If you'd like to put out a compost application now, that would equally be a great time to do so. So you tie all these things together in terms of coring, possibly seeding, compost applications, and then think about, well, how about fertility and lime? And it's like, of course, anything that we can do to move the fertilizer or the lime into the soil is going to pay big dividends for us as well. So we can do all of this, especially in the fall, because we've got such tremendous growth potential for these next 6 to 8 weeks. And I mentioned about the compost application. I'm a huge fan of compost. The only reason that compost isn't used more in lawn settings is quite simply because it's so difficult to handle. We just really don't have a lot of specialized tools out there in which you can go across a lawn and brush out and apply specific amounts. There are tools out there, but again, it's never taken off. I thought that it would 10 years ago, that in organic lawn care programs, some of the specialty equipment that we use to apply top dressing in golf turf, sports turf, would migrate into turf management at lawn care levels, and it just really hasn't happened. But here's what the science says. A 1/4 inch depth of compost as a surface application, 1 to 2 times annually. Wow, 2 thumbs up. It won't do immediate miracles for you, but the second and third year of being on this type of program, 1/4 inch depth, 1 to 2 times annually, you will start to visibly see the rewards from this application, because you are going to be building a healthy soil, which is going to promote a healthier plant system. You're going to get better tolerance to moisture stress, better disease resistance, because it's going to promote the activity of the good guys and gals in the fungal world rather than the bad guys and gals. And you're also going to reduce the need for supplemental fertilizers and pesticides just because of the healthier soil. Now, again, remember, no immediate satisfaction other than knowing that you did the right thing. But late year 2, definitely by year 3, if you left some type of a test strip out there where you didn't apply the compost, I promise you, you would see the response. It would be visible in terms of the composted treatment is definitely going to start to pay dividends. So encourage people to use it. Compost to me is you still need to buy quality material. As we continue to figure out better ways to make the applications right now, that really is what the limitation is no easy way to apply these amounts. A lot of hand labor has to be done. And let's talk about mowing. Cool season mowing, if you desire to have that closer cut lawn, then the fall is the season with which you can legitimately start dropping that height. And we still want people to follow what is called the 1/3 rule. Don't scalp the turf, never remove more than 1/3 of the blade at any event. But if you want to start, dropping your height down, so in the world of turf type tall fescues, I tell people during the summertime on tall fescue, cool season grass in general, raise your mower to the highest setting possible. Keep it there as needed all summer. Stay off the lawn as much as you can during summer stress. But now that we're into September through the month of October, if you really want to have that great looking lawn that makes those mums and other fall blooming plants kind of pop, the changing of the seasons and the color in your trees, here's the season in which you can start to drop those mowing heights. And I tell people, if you want to cut tall fescue 2 inches in the fall, that's great. Tall fescue is going to perform at 2 inches in the fall. But we want to make sure that we've survived the summer before we do that. Don't scalp it. Slowly but surely drop those heights. Keep up on top of that mowing. In the warm season world, totally different philosophy. I told you this earlier. Your strategy now should be, like here in Blacksburg, we're probably a month out now from our first killing frost. It typically occurs in Blacksburg somewhere between October 10th to October 12th. So anyone that has warm season grasses in our climate, there's not a lot of them, but if you do, I'm telling them, start raising your cutting height now. Okay, so put that mower deck up, cut these grasses taller, 3 to 4 weeks, let them put away as much stored food for that winter dormancy period as you possibly can. And keep this in mind. One of the publications that gets the most hits that I've been involved in and from a cooperative extension purpose has been the leaf recycling. If you can get a rotary mower over top of the leaves that are falling from all of your trees, then it's fair game to chop them up. I caution people to remember that it's not a stump grinder. You need to pick up, limbs and bark and everything else. You don't want to get hurt. You don't want somebody else to get hurt. You don't want to damage your mower. But as the leaves fall on your cool season lawn, hey, chop them up, put that material right back into the lawn. There's not a lot of nutrient value from these leaves because trees are extremely efficient in removing a lot of that nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, et cetera, and storing it for next year's spring leaf season. But it's going to provide organic matter, and it also keeps you from all the additional effort of raking these things up, getting them out to the street, or hopefully you're not doing it, but we see it all the time, people putting them in bags and then sending those bags off to the landfill. So put these leaves to work for you by creating organic matter. It's quite easy to do with a very basic mulching mower. These are mower decks that are designed to keep the clippings underneath the deck, keep chopping them up in smaller parts. You'd like there to be a little bit of moisture in the lawn, but not too much, okay? And again, the key is, can I get the deck over top? And some people, if you live in a a deep forest or woods, I'm like, yeah, probably can't do that. But if you can get the mower deck over top of the leaves and take your time, chop these up as they're dropped, again, all you're going to do is basically be providing organic material, and that's a good thing. So mulching mower, return grass clippings, they are free fertilizer. Returned leaves from hardwood trees, they're mostly organic matter. Keep in mind, if you're not currently recycling these clippings on your lawn, if you leave the clippings on your lawn, you basically are meeting a third of your seasonal fertility requirement, and you're keeping things out of the landfill. So this is a great way to apply nutrients naturally, because leaves are nothing more than organic fertilizer. And it's also a great way to manage tree leaves, which will be increasing soil organic matter levels. So keep the bags out of the landfill. Fall is the primary season to optimize the benefits of our most important nutrient for fertilization, and that is logically nitrogen. And this strategy applies to cool season turf grasses. So something that Master Gardener volunteers that work with homeowners have been just huge, and I thank you so much for what you do, but it's letting people understand exactly how much area that they are managing. It amazes me how many people overestimate the size of their properties. And it doesn't matter what the level of education is. If this is something you don't do, you don't know, it's always the case, you don't know what you don't know. I tell the story that it was a great neighbor of mine that was a nuclear submarine commander, and I use this over and over again. So imagine how brilliant you have to be a nuclear submarine commander, but he had no concept of how big his yard was. And he managed his lawn as 2 acres, 86,000 square feet. His actual lawn was about 14,000 square feet. So every time he was treating it 6, 7, 8x, and couldn't understand why he was having problems. And so I finally, just went over and said, man, looks like you're baling hay. How much fertilizer are you using? He goes, only what I'm supposed to. I saw your publication. And I was like, well, how much you putting out? It looked like it was snowing. He was treating for 2 acres, 86,000 square feet. He only had 14,000 square feet. This brilliant man had no concept of what an acre looks like. Somebody told him, I bet your lawn's 2 acres. Help these people understand, what do they actually have in terms of area to be treated. There's so many apps available now, handheld GPS units, Google Earth, which you can get on and basically draw your lines. There's just no reason not to get reasonable measurements these days. And again, the Master Gardener volunteers, you've been immensely successful in getting this message across. And then once you know how much, then we can figure out how much area you have. We can figure out how much do I need. This change of seasons, fall, the prime time. Our key months, September, October, November, SON. That's your fall fertility window for optimizing the benefits to the turf health for this season as well as next spring. That's the part that people don't realize, is that all the benefits we achieve now are really going to kick in for us next year, and we don't want to put the majority of fertilizer out in the spring. We'd like it to go out now. Your warm season grasses, put them to bed. Keep the fertilizer away from them. If they need phosphorus, potash, or lime, that's okay, but cut back on the nitrogen. Use those soil tests to make sure that if I need it, we said it earlier, fall is a great time to make those changes, those amendments on any particular species. But fall fertility for cool season, SON, make sure you preach that to your clientele. And this is a table that comes straight out of one of our extension publications called Lawn Fertilization in Virginia. I use it just to tell people it's an idea of what a program looks like, but here's kind of the rules of thumb that I'd like y'all to have in mind that you would share with people that ask you about, well, how do we do this? Ballpark is we don't want to apply more than 0.7 of a pound of soluble nitrogen per 1,000 square feet every 4 weeks, every growing month. Do we need 0.7 in every case? No, that's why every now and then you see things here like 0.5s in this second column here, levels of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet for fescue, ryegrass, or bluegrass. This is an idea of what a fertility program for a season might look like. It's not written in stone because it can't be written in stone. The key is if you are going to fertilize, well, putting fertilizer out on cool season turf in September, great thing to do. October, great thing to do. November, maybe, maybe not. If you're not going for yard of the month, maybe you don't need it. April to May, we want you to look at that entire 2-month window. For that, those 2 months, maybe only 0.5 to 0.7. So we want basically 2/3, 3/4 of all of our nitrogen to go out in the fall on cool season, and then just a little bit to go out in the spring. And the little bit, it has benefits, but our challenge is that too many people put out most fertilizer in the spring and then do nothing in the fall. These seasonal totals are within the range of where we preach to people 2 to 3.5 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 annually is going to put you in the range of a legitimate, environmentally responsible nitrogen fertility program for most lawn grasses. But note, fine fescue, it doesn't need that much. Most people probably end up putting out about 1/2 to 1 pound of nitrogen. Our data show that you can go as high as 1.5, but we manage this grass very differently than we manage these. So be aware that this is a publication. You can use this as a training reference for people, help them build a fertility program. Again, nothing written in stone, just guidelines, principles that you can follow. And here's something that if you don't know this exists, you would do all the turf team at Tech a favor by, lawn care professionals apply fertilizer with calibrated spreaders and sprayers. Most homeowners don't have the patience, don't have the time, don't have the expertise to do this. We put together a whole series called Calling Dr. Turf. If you don't know this, I want you to give me honest, legit feedback like my son did, who said, this might go viral for all the wrong reasons, Dad, because we tried to be funny. I don't know if it's funny or not. We laughed. You might not laugh, but watch it, give us some feedback. And the one I want you to tell people about is application without calibration tells homeowners how they can use spreaders to put product out without having to do virtually any math. Okay? Calling Dr. Turf. Those of you that are 29 years old or probably remember a group that's still out there called KISS, who I saw KISS in concert back in the day. My mom couldn't believe I went to it, and I'm like, it wasn't good music, but it was loud. So check that out for us and give us some feedback. Last few comments here that we're 51 minutes in. Let's talk weed control, talk pest control. Dr. Askew's, our turf weed specialist, always comment is you kill more weeds with a healthy, dense lawn than any chemistry that you could apply. So this is one of the values of having decent turf is that, well, you're going to need less pesticides if your turf grass is managed appropriately because the grass becomes the natural competitor to the weed. Now, you're out there, somebody says, can you help me with what do I do about this? Got these monster crabgrass plants in my lawn right now. And here's the answer I want you to give them. Nothing. Don't treat this thing now. If you want to take a shovel out there and dig this up to win some kind of a prize, I get it. But we're 4 weeks away to maybe 6 weeks away around the state for killing frost. You've missed the window. This thing doesn't deserve to be treated now. It's like you've given it respect throughout the season. Leave it alone. Deal with it next spring with your herbicide. So that's the responsible way to treat any summer annual now is just let it be controlled by Mother Nature and the coming frost. But if you've got a history, your clientele has a history of a lot of winter annual weeds in their lawn. These are things like here top left, henbit or dead nettle, the right, chickweed, in the foreground, in the front, this is geranium, probably Carolina geranium. These are all things that can be controlled either by the use of a pre-emergent, a quote-unquote crabgrass herbicide here in the fall, just before they germinate. Now, if you're going to do it, I've got it highlighted there in all caps. Now is the time to make this application. But If you're going to seed, you can't apply the pre-emerge. Once they have emerged, then the pre-emerge is of no value. They'll have to treat them post-emergent. But people forget that you can use crabgrass herbicides in the fall. The answer is you can. You can control anything that's germinating in the fall, but you can't do it if you want to seed, and you can't wait too late for once the weeds have germinated. So I'm telling people, this was something you were thinking about, better do it soon, because a little moisture now and these fall weeds are already starting to pop, especially here in our area in Blacksburg. And if you have perennial broadleafs, fall is a tremendous time to treat them. We'd always like to treat, young, newly emerged weeds. And I said in the new establishments, those are quite easy to control. If it's a fully developed perennial like a dandelion, clover, or maybe these broadleaf plantains, great time to get them. These are pretty easy to control with standard broadleaf herbicide chemistry. You don't need anything fancy to get these three weeds. But then we have some of the ones that come into the extension offices over and over and over again. Dr. Askew calls these the sequentials. These are things like wood sorrel. Its scientific name is oxalis, the little heart-shaped leaves. Ground ivy, aka creeping Charlie, wild violet, speedwell. These products require a special active ingredient, which is not hard to find, but it's more heavy-duty broadleaf chemistry that has the AI of that name you see at the bottom of the screen called triclopyr. And one of the most common products that you see out there, and there are several ones there, it's just an image that I found that had it because it basically tells you this one kills the tough ones, ground ivy, other tough weeds. The AI is triclopyr. Its safety on cool season grasses is very high during cooler temperature windows. If you use it, you're still probably going to have to make sequential applications, 2 to 3 week windows, but fall is the time to go after these most difficult to control broadleaf weeds, because now's the time when they're translocating this chemistry throughout their plant. And that's what makes many of these things so difficult to control, is they have so much storage material that it's hard to get the herbicide translocated throughout to control all the different growing points. This was my lawn a few years ago. Somebody paid me a visit overnight. This is another potential fall pest. The pest is actually probably a skunk, but they are digging for grubs. So the causal agent was the grub, and then the damage was caused by the skunk. So if you see evidence that looks like somebody took a shovel to your lawn, that's a good indication that you have grubs. In this type of situation, you would probably want to apply a grubicide. We now have new active ingredients which are much safer in the environment. Chlorantraniliprole is now a common AI. For the longest time, you couldn't find it. Now it's standard. What I tell people, if you've got issues with grubs, apply that material back in late spring and summer and be done with grubs for the rest of the season, because the chemistry will go all year. And the chemistry is so safe, it doesn't have a signal word on the label. And the other thing that chemistry controls is this showed up in 2021 and caused record damage. This is an armyworm. Last year, we had hardly any damage, but this is the time of year when it shows up, and these things can just basically strip a cool season lawn literally overnight. So 2022, we had hardly any. People saying, what do you think about 2023? I don't know. What you watch for are tropical systems, hurricanes and tropical storms that bring the moths up from the south. The moths mate, lay the eggs, and the eggs hatch, and you get millions of worms. I tell people, follow the North Carolina State entomologist on social media to see what's going on. And that'll be our indication they're heading in our direction. Last slide. If you do the Twitter thing, please note that we've got all these resources out there. This is a big part of us telling people what we're seeing and hearing at particular points in time. So if you do any searching for VT turfgrass, somebody's going to come up. We all have different areas of specialty expertise. Let us know how we can help you. I appreciate what you all do. I tell you, call me whenever you can. This is a shot of me when I got my roller for my riding lawnmower. I'm so proud. to be able to stripe my lawn like the pros do. These are all some great striping things I've seen over the years. But my coolest lawn ever was this one with the VT and zoysia grass in tall fescue. And you see, that's got Christmas lights behind it. Every year we beat UVA, we light this bad boy up so it shows from 460, and all the UVA fans can see who we support in the Goatley household. I'm going to stop sharing. I want to take any questions that I can for as long as anybody wishes to ask Devin. So if you've got some, please let me know.
Yeah, we got plenty of questions today. Thanks so much, Mike. That was really good. I think I'm going to get super into turf grass.
You say that, but I don't know if I believe it, Devin.
No, I think I actually might. I think the weed suppression is probably the best argument for it, honestly. So there, the 23-24 turf grass recommendation pub is up online. I put the link in the chat if you go back up to the top.
Thank you.
Somebody did ask about trying to find the recommended mixes in stores. Do you have any tips for that?
More specialty stores outside the big box are places to check. Landscape Supply, Site One, Merrifield, Turf and Garden over in the coast. Those types of stores typically are making seed selections on the basis of the Tech and Maryland recommendations. So I tell you, look there. You can also find things online. There are several seed superstores online, which you can almost put together certain things. But check your specialty stores first, and then do look at the big boxes. But like, have your phone with you, take that list with you, and then kind of shop around and compare for those names, because quite often sources from Pennington, you're going to see maybe 2 of those varieties. If I get anything that's got 50 to 67% of name varieties, I feel pretty good about that. And some people got some great varieties, and I just can't say anything about them because we haven't evaluated them. And so we don't talk about it. We haven't looked at them. But I tell people it could be awesome, but I just don't know to tell you they're awesome.
Perfect. A question about that example where you totally replace the turf in the lawn. After you applied glyphosate to the whole surface, how long did you wait before seeding?
3 days is the window of, according to the label, for almost all the glyphosate products. So not very long at all in which you can treat. Now, the thing would be, real world, if you've got really difficult to control weeds, you'd like to give it probably a week, because you'd like to optimize the translocation of that product through those below ground parts. But as little as 3 days means it's safe for your germinating seed. I tell people that works, but if you got, things like Creeping Charlie and Wild Violet, I want to give them a little bit longer, at least probably say 7 days would be better from the standpoint of getting better control of the weed.
Okay. And then can you talk a little bit about the difference between leaving or applying compost to your lawn and then versus leaving grass clippings or some of the straw or leaves?
Yeah, think of the grass clippings as, to me, that's like the cotton candy of the turf grass world in terms of organic fertility. Microbes very quickly break down grass clippings. And if they didn't, we know how quickly all that stuff would start to appear on our lawn, since many of us are mowing cool season grasses, at least a couple of times a week during the fall, in which to keep that 1/3 rule in place. Compost is taking the organic material down to this very stable point, very predictable in terms of it contains this level of carbon, this level of nitrogen, it has a certain pH. Your challenge with the compost materials, and there are many of them out there, but do ask for specs, because anybody that has compost that's selling quality products going to want to promote that we've got something approved by the U.S. Composting Council. So ask those types of questions. The biggest challenge is if it's been screened, you might be able to apply compost through a rotary spreader on the widest setting possible, but many of the compost materials still have clumps or chunks of that material, and those obviously are going to clog that spreader. That remains our biggest challenge. There are some places that I've seen that rent a an applicator that actually has brushes on it with a conveyor belt. And the conveyor belt, if you check online for something called top dressers, you'll see these. It brushes out very light application amounts. I thought those things were really going to move into more of this organic lawn management push, but it just never happened. And it's probably because those types of tools would cost the applicator an additional $8,000 to $10,000 to buy that piece of equipment. So that's our biggest challenge, unfortunately, is to apply it. If you can sling it out with a shovel and then take that piece of chain link fence or something and drag it over the lawn in multiple directions, that'll work fine. It's just not easy to do.
That was going to be the next question, was actually about applying compost.
Yeah. So think about what amounts you need for the area. Know what your area is. Do your calculations about, well, what's a 1/4 inch over that area equate? And then be sure you walk that and sling that over the lawn. And then again, probably take something and drag that around to distribute as best as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be absolute. But again, you don't want 4 inches of compost piled over here. That's going to be dead grass. You want to get that material distributed as uniformly around the lawn as you possibly can.
All right. And our next question is, do you recommend putting down fertilizer before or after overseeding an established lawn?
Yes. Doesn't really matter. Either way will work. Unless you're just applying some ridiculous amount, but follow typical, recommended application rates. You're not going to have an issue whether you do it before or after. Same thing with the coring. You could core after seeding, and I'm sure you're damaging some seed, but never enough that you would have any idea that you've done anything negative.
Okay, and then our next question, I think this is for grubs. What about milky spore?
Yeah, milky spore for grubs. Milky spore, unfortunately, only has activity on Japanese beetle grubs. And it is very effective. They've worked out a lot of the problems with milky spore over the past few years that we had with its efficacy 5-6 years ago. But keep that in mind, because year in and year out, our grub populations, our beetle populations just kind of fluctuate all over the place. And if you have a lot of mass Schaefer, European mass Schaefer grubs, unfortunately, milky spore has no activity on them. So it is a value, but it only targets that one particular species, and that's always a challenge for us.
And I think somebody says chemical name for grubs, ? I think that's a recommendation for the pesticide.
Yeah, I am going to type that in, but it was the chemical for grubs. Let's see if I can spell it right. Chlorantraniliprole is the active ingredient. So I'm going to put that here in the chat box. If you take a picture of that, the good thing about this is the chemistry that when it came out, it has revolutionized grub and also worm control. Has zero effect on beneficials. Bees doesn't touch. It was unbelievable. Therefore, it was extremely expensive. It is still expensive, but it is now widely available. And most of the old products that contained imidacloprid have now transitioned to this new chemistry. So it's a boon for the environment, as well as grub and armyworm, cutworm, webworm. It gets all those things, and it has a pretty significant residual period as well. So that's your active ingredient to look for on the label, chlorantraniliprole.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And then we have one last question here. Somebody says, I have a mostly fescue lawn in full sun in an area that tends to flood. What kind of grass do you suggest? I reseed the thinning. Oh, what kind of grass do you suggest I reseed the thinning spots with? Also, should I compost then reseed?
No perfect answer, but your efforts there at fescue, I think, are still the most appropriate in terms of predictability. The compost, yeah, and again, same thing about compost before, compost after, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I don't really think it will make a difference for you, but stay after it with the turf type tall fescues, knowing that there is no particular, perfect grass there. If you try this and it basically just continues to fail miserably, believe it or not, the most wet soils tolerant grass that we can grow is creeping bent grass, which is a golf course putting green turf. And I'm not telling you to mow it as putting green turf at 1/8 of an inch, but that's something that will persist you only seed it at about maybe a quarter to a half pound per 1,000 square feet. But it has a whole series of issues in terms of disease problems, because it is a very disease susceptible grass, but it actually is our best performer in persistently poorly drained soil. So I throw that out there as an option.
Oh, actually, Rick has a really good question in the chat. What's the viability on seed mixes, and what would a best by date of 2022? What would you recommend that he do with?
I would still use it. What I would probably do would be to bump up that seeding rate, maybe, another, say, bump it up 25%. So let's say if it was tall fescue and you said, I'm going to seed at 6 pounds, I would definitely be seeding it at 7.5 pounds. Our rule of thumb is anything within a calendar year of today's date is probably still pretty close to purity and living seed. So it's not going to be that bad. Again, something has perished in that bag, because seed only have a defined life as long as they've got stored energy in the seed. But I feel pretty good about that seed with a 12/20/22 date on there.
Okay. And what was the name of your YouTube series again?
Calling Dr. Turf.
Calling Dr. Turf. I'm gonna look that up. I'll post that on the link to that on the website too.
Yeah, I'm just so disappointed. We haven't even broke 100 views yet, and I'm like, how are we ever going to win an Emmy?
We'll help you. We'll help you break the 100.
Yes, we got to. And give me bad feedback. Just give me feedback.
What comment on that is that it's a terrific series. I've enjoyed watching it. And one last question, hopefully, wireweed. I'm not finding much information on that and dealing with it in the lawn. Have any thoughts, recommendations?
John, thank you for that comment. I saw it pop up here. There is an extension publication that Dr. Askew and I put together. If you check the VCE website, should be something you search for Bermuda grass, wiregrass control. There should be an entire publication devoted to all the options to go after that. Wiregrass is common Bermuda grass. The reason I didn't talk about it now is, quite honestly, we're in that we're getting too late to treat. Could we still treat with chemicals this fall? The answer is we can. That extension pub will lay out the chemistry for you and what to do, but ideally, that's the type of thing that we need to initiate probably about 4 weeks earlier than today's date. And we'd now be making our follow-up application. But the end of summer, early fall is the prime window to go after it, because what we're doing is essentially weakening the wiregrass to the point of where it doesn't have enough stored food to persist all winter. And that's our worry about, well, initiating your treatments now, it's probably already got enough carbohydrate put away to make it. So I'm not saying don't give it a try, but check that out. You should find everything you want to know about wiregrass control in that extension pub. And if you can't find it, just email me and I'll particularly send you that link. But that was something we added last year.
Is it called selective Bermuda grass control?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I'll put the link in the chat. And that might be, maybe we'll see if you can come back in the spring and talk about that.
And that would be a good one. Devin, your best would be to get Dr. Askew on and let him go with all things weeds. Because he can cover, I know enough to be really dangerous, and I can do the basics. But since we got a specialist, y'all might as well hear from the best. And Sean was probably the preeminent researcher in Bermuda grass / wiregrass control in the country to come up with the protocol. And control, he'll still tell you it's a strong word when you say control, but we can really suppress it now versus what we used to do.
Okay, I'll see if he wants to come in the spring, and maybe we'll get like a psychiatrist to come also, because it's the most depressing thing to have to deal with. Okay, thanks so much, Mike. This was awesome. If anyone came in late or wants to go back and double check something, this is going to be posted on the website probably tomorrow or Monday. And Dr. Coatley has generously offered to share his presentation as well. So we'll have the presentation up there, and I'll put a link to Calling Dr. Turf. Thanks so much, Mike. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And I'll see y'all in October. I said at the beginning, we don't have an October state office webinar scheduled because working on collaborating with the Plant Virginia Natives campaign to do a little series in honor of what they have had the governor declare Virginia Native Trees Month for October. So hopefully we'll see you in October to talk about Virginia native trees, and just keep an eye out for an announcement in the biweekly about the dates for those as well. Yes, and I will put the link to the website in the chat as well, the webinar page.
Thank you all for your time and joining today. Let me know how I can help you.
Thank you. Thank you as well.